Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's deep dive. English listening practice topic name is 30 plus C1 level vocabulary on risks.
That's right. And it's a great topic because, well, for anyone really aiming for that C1 level or, just trying to navigate those more high stakes conversations.
Like in business or academia?
Exactly. Or journalism. You quickly find that the basic words, they just fall short sometimes. So today isn't just about memorizing a list.
No, definitely not.
We're aiming to build a sort of spatialized linguistic toolkit. The real goal is to move way beyond just saying something's dangerous or secure.
I like that. A toolkit. Because the mission here really is about nuance, isn't it? And getting that analytical precision. We want you, the listener, to feel equipped.
Equipped to talk about the whole spectrum.
Right. From, say, a subtle vulnerability in a system to an outright sudden disaster, and to do it with the kind of accuracy and, well, the gravitas that advanced communication really demands.
We're taking these terms and making them functional. Tools for high-stakes analysis.
Yeah, turning the list into an instrument.
And that really is the essence of C1 level vocabulary, wouldn't you say? These terms, they don't just describe a risk. They help you articulate why it exists.
Or who's causing it.
Exactly. Or what's initiating it, and maybe how you might prevent it. It covers so much ground: finance, strategy, safety protocols, even global disasters.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's dive right in. We can start with the basics, how we actually articulate the threat itself. So when we talk about risk at this higher level, we need words that convey seriousness, scale. Danger often feels, well, a bit too general.
It does.
Let's start with a classic C1 term, peril. What gives peril its weight? How's it really different from just a standard risk?
Well, peril.
Yeah.
It definitely carries a much heavier connotation. It describes the state of being actively threatened.
Or exposed.
Exposed to something bad, presumably.
Through a significant, often quite widespread negative event.
Yeah.
It suggests immediate danger, or at least imminent danger, often on a grand scale.
Right. So we wouldn't really talk about the peril of, forgetting your keys. No, probably not. It's reserved for scenarios where the stakes are really high. Massive.
So it implies this comprehensive, maybe even existential kind of danger. Can you give us a couple of examples where peril is used really effectively?
Sure. Think about the classic physical sense, explorers facing the peril of uncharted jungles, or a ship caught in a huge storm facing maritime peril.
Okay, the traditional adventure stuff.
Right. But peril scales up really well. In economics, you'll hear analysts discussing the growing financial peril looming over markets, perhaps because of, say, reckless speculation.
Or in politics.
Absolutely. You might hear about democracy facing peril from extreme polarization. The word implies not just risk, but genuine exposure to potential ruin, or even death in some contexts.
That makes the distinction quite clear. It's that whole atmosphere of serious, maybe inescapable danger. Okay, now let's tackle two terms that people often mix up. Hazard versus menace. We need to get the difference straight between a sort of stationary risk and an active threat.
Yeah, this is a really crucial distinction for advanced vocabulary. Hazard. Fundamentally, it's an inherent source of potential danger.
Potential being the key word.
I think so. It's a condition or an object that poses a risk, but it's often passive. The danger is just sort of baked into the environment. It's there.
So like a drum of chemicals sitting in storage.
Yeah.
That's the hazard. It's just sitting there, static.
Precisely. Chemical storage hazards, radiation hazards, or even simple things like wet floors in a workplace. They're slipping hazards. There are potential dangers just waiting for an interaction.
Waiting for someone to slip or for the drum to leak.
Exactly. But a menace, that's something else entirely. A menace implies someone or something that actively causes or is likely to cause danger, or even just significant annoyance. It has this dynamic, threatening quality.
Okay, so if that chemical drum starts leaking, the leak itself, the spreading contamination that becomes the menace.
You've got it. Or think about cybersecurity. An unpatched server, that's a hazard. It's a known vulnerability just sitting there. But the persistent malware that's actively probing that server, trying to get in, that's the cyber menace.
It's doing something. It's active.
Yes. Or ecologically, a dry forest prone to fire is a hazard. But maybe a large invasive insect species that actively destroys trees, making fires worse, that becomes an environmental menace. The difference really boils down to agency. A hazard waits, a menace acts.
That active quality is key, especially for high-level reporting or analysis. Okay, moving into crisis situations. When those threats actually materialize, we need precise language for the emergency and, unfortunately, sometimes the tragedy. Let's look at distress and death toll.
Right, distress. It has a powerful, often quite formalized meaning, especially in contexts like maritime or aviation.
Like a ship sending out an SOS.
Exactly. It describes a situation where a vehicle, a vessel, maybe even an individual, requires urgent help because they're in serious immediate danger. When a pilot transmits a mayday signal, that's a formal distress call. It immediately escalates the situation.
International emergency status, right?
Yes. But the term isn't just for ships and planes, is it? For the C1 learner, how else might it apply?
That's a good question. It definitely has broader applications. You hear about financial distress, for instance.
Ah, right. When a company is facing insolvency, maybe bankruptcy, and needs intervention, governments might offer distress funds to help failing industries.
And psychologically, too.
Absolutely. Psychological distress refers to extreme mental or emotional suffering. It can be an overwhelming, debilitating internal crisis state. So when you use the word distress, you're really signaling a serious, urgent need for relief or rescue.
That definitely broadens its usefulness. Okay, and then, unfortunately, when risk management fails, we have to talk about the consequences. That brings us to the death toll. Grim, but essential.
It is. It's often the ultimate measure of impact in a disaster. The death toll is simply the calculated number of people who have died as a direct result of something, an accident, a conflict, a natural disaster.
And when a catastrophe hits, like a huge flood or a terrorist attack, those initial reports, they always focus on the rising death toll.
They do. It's the immediate human cost.
And understanding that death toll is often what fuels change later, right? Like, advocating for stricter building codes after an earthquake is usually a direct response to analyzing the death toll from previous ones, trying to minimize future losses.
That's a perfect example of its relevance. It's a measurable consequence that can drive real systemic change. Okay, now let's shift slightly and look at an adjective that connects risk to reputation. Notorious.
Notorious. So widely known, but specifically for something bad. How does that link into risk analysis?
Well, it basically creates a shortcut for predictable risk. If a person or a place is notorious, you can anticipate a higher level of risk just by dealing with them or being there.
So like the notorious gambler who keeps losing fortunes, interacting with them financially is risky?
Exactly. Or the notorious currency speculator who's maybe caused market collapses before. They represent a known risk in any boardroom discussion. You don't always need a deep dive into their background. The notorious reputation itself is the warning signal.
And applying it to places or things, we might talk about a specific road being notorious for accidents and fog. The risk is known, predictable.
Right. The structural risk of the road is maybe compounded by known environmental factors, and everyone knows about it. Or in tech, a notorious security vulnerability means it's a well-known flaw that cybercriminals are actively exploiting.
Ah, okay.
So using notorious signals to a professional audience, this isn't just a problem, it's a recognized, recurring, significant negative factor that needs immediate attention. It helps move the conversation past just awareness and straight into what do we do about it? Strategy.
That actually leads us perfectly into the next section. Analyzing the human element, the kind of behavior that invites risk. We want to focus on terms describing volitional risk-taking or maybe careless risk-taking. The first two often get confused, but we need that C1 distinction, reckless versus rash.
Yes, and they are separated by, I'd say, intent and attitude. Reckless implies a really profound disregard, maybe indifference toward the dangerous results of what you're doing.
So the person knows the consequences are possible, they just don't care enough.
Pretty much. They don't care enough to mitigate them. It's really defined by that negligence, that attitude.
So a reckless driver, they aren't necessarily speeding just because they're late. They might be driving dangerously because they're ignoring the road conditions, the speed limits, other people's safety.
Absolutely. The intent feels negligent. You see reckless investments in finance too, where maybe executives ignore detailed due diligence reports because they think they know better, or they're chasing some crazy short-term gain. The behavior is characterized by a failure to heed warnings.
Okay, a failure to heed warnings. And how does rash differ from that kind of negligence?
Rash. Rash puts the emphasis more on impulsivity. It's the tendency to act without careful, sufficient thought about the possible outcomes. It's more about the speed of the decision, not necessarily that deep disregard. It's just suddenness, lack of planning.
Ah, that's a subtle but really important line. So if I suddenly quit my job in a huff after one bad meeting, that sounds like a rash decision.
That's a great example. It was impulsive, probably poorly thought out. You acted too quickly.
Right.
Or in a high-stakes negotiation, imagine a team leader just caves and makes a critical concession the moment the other side pushes back without thinking it through or checking their mandate. That's a rash action. It could ruin the whole deal.
Okay, so the difference is reckless is more about lack of heed, ignoring warnings.
Yes.
While rash is more about lack of thought, acting too fast.
Exactly. You could almost say one feels like a character flaw, the recklessness, while the other is more of a temporal failure, a mistake in the moment.
Fascinating. Okay, let's push to the extreme edge of voluntary risk now. We have the daredevil and the concept of madness.
Right. A daredevil. Well, that's a figure who really embraces voluntary peril. They are individuals who are, you could say, reckless by profession or maybe as a hobby.
They choose the danger.
They deliberately choose to do dangerous things, often for the thrill or for entertainment, or maybe for a profound sense of personal achievement. Stunt performers, high-altitude climbers, base jumpers.
They almost monetize the risk, or at least build a reputation on it. Their success depends on controlling the peril they deliberately court.
Precisely. Risk becomes a chosen lifestyle. Now, contrast that with madness. In this C1 context, madness refers to behavior that is just incredibly stupid or imprudent and likely to lead to danger or chaos. It's used almost like folly or insanity when you're judging an action.
Like betting your entire life savings on one completely unproven tech startup, someone might say that's sheer madness.
Yes. It's a judgment on the complete lack of common sense, maybe the perceived inevitability of disaster. Historically, you look at things like speculative bubbles, the dot-com bubble, maybe where people knowingly pour money into assets totally disconnected from reality. Those are often described later as periods of collective financial madness.
It's a pretty strong term for profound stupidity in high-stakes situations.
It is. But you mentioned the source material hinted at a potentially positive spin sometimes, this idea of controlled madness.
Yeah, what's that about?
Well, that usually pops up in a creative or maybe revolutionary context. Sometimes, to make a real breakthrough, you have to take an intellectual leap, or a creative one that seems like utter folly to people stuck in conventional thinking.
Ah, okay. Like a scientist pursuing a theory that completely contradicts accepted wisdom.
Exactly. They might be accused of scientific madness by their peers, but sometimes that very leap, that willingness to look mad, is what generates true innovation. It's like a calculated eccentricity almost.
That makes sense. Which brings us neatly to the positive side of risk-taking. Boldness. How do we define and use boldness, especially professionally?
Boldness. It's defined as that quality of being willing to take risks, crucially, without being paralyzed by fear. But it's usually coupled with strategic intent. It implies courage, yes, but also a clear vision for a positive outcome.
So it's not just risk for the sake of risk, like a daredevil might embrace. Boldness is aimed at achieving something specific, something desired.
Precisely. You see boldness when, say, a pharmaceutical company invests billions into a totally new, untested kind of treatment, hoping for a breakthrough. That's bold.
Or in negotiations.
Right. A team shows boldness by holding firm on their key demands, even under pressure, and they secure a really advantageous deal where maybe a less bold team would have compromised too early. It's the courageous application of strategy.
Okay. And if boldness is having that courage when facing risk, then its opposite, cowardice, is the lack of it. And that lack also carries a cost, right?
Absolutely. Cowardice in this context is that profound lack of courage that stops someone from taking necessary action. And the cost of that cowardice is often missing out on a potential gain, or worse, failing to prevent harm.
You see that in corporations sometimes.
Definitely. Think about the cowardice of managers who refuse to admit a major project is failing because they're afraid of the reputational damage. They let it bleed money instead of making the tough call.
So the risk you don't take out of fear can end up being just as costly as a risk taken rashly or recklessly. It's a failure of nerve, basically, moral or strategic nerve. Okay, we've looked at the nature of risk, the behaviors that invite it. Now let's pivot completely. Let's talk about mitigation, the crucial phase of dealing with risk. We need language to describe moving from just recognizing a threat to actively defending against it. Let's start with precaution and safeguard.
Yeah, these two are absolute cornerstones of any safety plan, any compliance discussion, but they have distinct uses. A precaution is usually the active step, the measure you take to prevent something bad from happening. It feels procedural.
Okay, so like wearing safety goggles in a lab, that's a precaution. Doing fire drills, encrypting sensitive emails, those are precautions, actions.
That's exactly right. They're activities, steps you take. Backing up your computer data every day is a fundamental precaution against, say, ransomware attacks. Getting regular preventative maintenance done on factory machinery is an essential precaution.
Right. So how is that different from a safeguard?
A safeguard, that tends to refer more to the mechanism, the inherent structure or the law or the rule, maybe a physical barrier that provides the protection. It's more like the established protective system itself, rather than the action you take within that system.
Ah, okay. So the fire escape stairs on a building, that structure is a safeguard. The law requiring those fire escapes is also a safeguard.
Yes.
And maybe the firewall software protecting a computer network, that's the safeguard.
Exactly. You implement precautions, like using complex passwords, often by relying on safeguards, like secure authentication systems. So the safeguard is the structural defense. The precaution is the operational step you take. Nailing down that difference is really vital if you're writing, say, policy documents or safety manuals.
That clarifies it brilliantly.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, verbs. Let's focus on the verbs we use to actually communicate warnings, moving maybe from gentle advice to a more direct command.
We've got a nice progression here. First, to caution. This is usually informative, maybe consultative. You're warning someone about something difficult or potentially dangerous, but not necessarily aggressively.
Like a tour guide might caution hikers about slippery rocks ahead.
Perfect example. Or a financial advisor might caution a client about the high volatility of a particular stock. A museum sign might caution visitors against using flash photography near old paintings.
It feels like a polite advisory.
It often is. Then you have to be aware. Now, this is much more immediate, explicit, forceful. It's basically a direct command to watch out for a specific danger and stay vigilant.
Like those signs, beware of the dog, or beware of falling rocks.
Exactly. We're constantly advising the public to beware of online scams or phishing emails. It demands active, ongoing attention to that specific threat.
That's definitely the language of imminent threat. Okay, and following that vigilance, hopefully we get to the moment of successful prevention. To avert.
Yes. To avert is really the verb of success in mitigation. It means you prevented something dangerous or unpleasant from happening, often just before it was about to occur. It implies quick, effective action.
Like slamming on the brakes just in time averted a car crash.
Precisely. Or maybe the pilot's quick thinking and skillful maneuvers averted a potential mid-air disaster. On a larger scale, complex logistical planning might have averted a supply chain breakdown.
It often seems used for major complex threats too, doesn't it? Like careful diplomacy averted an international crisis or a trade war. It suggests the threat was really neutralized right before it ignited.
That's a great way to put it. It describes effectively neutralizing an impending threat, often through skilled human intervention or strategic planning.
Okay, beyond strategy, security often relies on actual physical or digital containment. The source material included the practical action to lock away and the resulting secure place, refuge.
Right, to lock away. It sounds simple, but it's essential in any discussion about protecting assets or ensuring safety. It just means securing physical items, or maybe digital data, in a heavily protected or fastened location.
Like confidential files in a safe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Organizations have to lock away confidential paper documents. Labs need to lock away hazardous biological samples in properly monitored storage to prevent any accidental exposure or theft.
And then refuge. That's the environment of safety itself.
It is. It's often the ultimate goal when you're facing serious danger. A refuge is a place, or sometimes even just a circumstance, that offers protection, physical, emotional, maybe financial safety from peril.
Like a storm shelter during a hurricane?
Yes, or a community center serving as a refuge for families displaced by a flood. Metaphorically, you hear about people seeking refuge in routine or tradition when the world feels chaotic. It's the haven you find away from the storm.
All right, moving on. Let's dig into the language of prudence. How we describe a more restrained approach, maybe emotionally or professionally, when managing unknown risks.
The adjectives guarded and wary seem like excellent C1 terms for this.
They are, and they both communicate caution, but in quite different ways. To be guarded, that's more about internal restraint. It means you're not displaying your feelings openly, or maybe not giving away much information.
And why? To reduce risk.
Specifically, to mitigate the risk of being exploited or showing vulnerability. It's kind of defensive posture, really rooted in self-protection.
Okay, so maybe a corporate executive involved in secret merger talks remains guarded in all their conversations, even social ones. They're intentionally not revealing what they know.
Exactly. It's tactical silence, you could say. And we often hear that phrase, guarded optimism, especially regarding things like economic forecasts.
Right. What does that really mean? It means Well, we see some positive signs, but we're holding back our enthusiasm because the final outcome is still uncertain and there's still significant risks involved. The restraint itself is a kind of precaution.
That phrase, guarded optimism, really captures that sophisticated caution, doesn't it? It's perfect C1 usage. Okay, so how does that contrast with being wary?
Being wary, that's more about external observation, attentiveness. It means you're feeling or showing caution and paying close attention because of possible external dangers or problems. It's a state of heightened alert focused on the environment around you.
Okay, so wary investors are constantly scanning the news, checking market indicators, watching geopolitical events, trying to anticipate volatility. They're watching outwardly for danger.
Precisely. They are hypervigilant about the outside world. Or wary hikers. They check the weather forecast repeatedly. They observe changes in the clouds or the terrain before they decide to proceed. They're actively looking for threats around them.
So if you're guarded, you're defending your internal position, keeping things in. If you're wary, you're closely watching the outside world for threats.
That's a great summary. And this kind of prudence, this wariness, is often linked to susceptibility, which brings us to the word liable. This is a really interesting one because it works in legal contexts, physical ones, probabilistic ones.
Yeah, it's versatile.
It really is. That's why it's a critical C1 term. So in the legal sense, being liable means you are legally responsible for something, usually a cost or a debt. If a company is found liable for polluting a river, they have to pay for the cleanup.
Okay, that's the high-stakes legal use. But you mentioned it applies to non-human things, too.
Correct. In a more probabilistic sense, liable means something is possible to do a particular action, or it's susceptible, prone to something negative happening.
Like
wet floors are liable to cause slips. An old, poorly maintained bridge is liable to collapse under heavy load. Children, especially in winter, are liable to catch colds. It describes an inherent condition or weakness that makes a negative outcome more probable.
it points to a built-in vulnerability, increasing the chance of something bad. Okay. We also need to talk about the intensity of risk, or the intensity of our awareness. The adverb acutely comes in here.
Yes, acutely. It means with sharp intensity or sometimes steepness. And its usefulness really comes from that dual application. Physically, it can describe steepness. The mountain path rose acutely towards the icy summit, signaling severe physical danger.
Right.
In data analysis, if a grass curve rises acutely, that signals a sudden steep acceleration. Could be profits, but more relevant here, it could be risk exposure increasing acutely.
And perceptually, it elevates awareness beyond just knowing something.
Exactly. Being acutely aware of a danger means you don't just acknowledge it exists. You feel the sharpness, the immediacy of the threat. A chief security officer might be acutely aware of the geopolitical risks tied to their company's operations in a volatile region. It conveys a deep, almost penetrating level of realization.
Got it. Okay, finally in this section, let's touch on two key operational terms that define how we actually engage with quantified risk: gamble and to compromise.
Right. A gamble. It's an act you undertake knowing there's a significant risk involved, but you do it because there's a possibility of a large success or reward. It's fundamentally a high-stakes choice.
So investing heavily in a really volatile emerging market, or maybe launching a revolutionary new product based on totally unproven technology, those are often described as big corporate gambles.
They are. And the sophisticated speaker uses the term gamble to acknowledge that risk factor up front, while perhaps justifying the potential reward. The key, of course, is distinguishing a calculated, maybe necessary gamble from one that's just rash or downright reckless.
That distinction again. Okay, and to compromise. Here, we're not talking about meeting in the middle in a negotiation.
No, not that positive sense. Here, to compromise means to endanger something, to jeopardize its integrity or safety, often through carelessness or neglect.
Like skipping critical security updates for your software, that could compromise the whole network security.
Absolutely. It opens it up to those cyber menaces we talked about. Lack of proper maintenance compromises the structural integrity of a bridge or building. In sensitive discussions, leaking confidential information prematurely compromises your strategic position. It's basically the act of creating a vulnerability where one shouldn't exist.
Okay, so we've analyzed how risk is created, how we can mitigate it, how we describe it. Now let's look at the actions taken when a threat becomes truly imminent, and then the possible final outcomes. When danger is right there, the primary action is often to flee.
Yes, to flee. It's immediate, often non-negotiable. It means escaping danger or getting out of a dangerous place fast. During a natural disaster, like a rapidly spreading wildfire, authorities order residents to flee the area immediately.
No time for discussion.
None. Or in a legal context, if a suspect fled the scene of a crime or fled the country, they are actively escaping the danger of facing consequences. It's the ultimate reactive response to sudden, overwhelming peril.
And if someone or something can't flee, then external help is needed. That brings us to rescue.
Right. Rescue is the structured action, the process of saving someone or something from a dangerous or difficult situation. It's the counterpoint to fleeing, in a way. Someone intervenes.
Like mountain rescue teams pulling stranded climbers off a cliff.
That's the classic physical rescue. But it can also be financial, remember. A government might organize a financial rescue package to prevent the catastrophic collapse of a major bank that's in distress. It signifies salvation, recovery from imminent failure.
And then the phrase everyone hopes to hear when a crisis is over, safe and sound.
Yes, the desired, unambiguous, positive outcome. Safe and sound just means not damaged, not injured, not compromised in any way, completely unharmed and secure.
Like after days battling a storm, the ship finally reached port, safe and sound.
Perfect. Or the missing child was found safe and sound. It's the confirmation of complete success, whether that success came through effective precautions or a successful rescue.
Now, in today's complex world, not all outcomes are quite so neat. Sometimes things just disappear or they're unaccounted for, which brings us to that useful, slightly informal acronym, AWOL.
Ah, yes, AWOL. Originally military slang absent without leave, but it's really evolved in general usage. Now it describes pretty much anything that's inexplicably missing, absent, not where it should be. And that absence often signals some kind of unaccounted for risk or consequence.
So if a critical safety valve is suddenly missing from a machine right before an inspection, you might say the valve has gone AWOL.
Exactly. Or if you're compiling a crucial financial report and the key sales figures for the last quarter seem to have gone AWOL from the database, that signals an immediate operational risk. Something's wrong and it needs urgent investigation. It's a very handy, versatile term for that kind of unexpected vanishing or disruption.
It is useful. Okay, and finally, sometimes a journey or a project or even just a trip is characterized by numerous challenges, maybe some close calls. We often summarize that kind of experience as eventful.
Right. Eventful. It simply means filled with important, exciting, or crucially here, dangerous events. It's the perfect adjective for a high-variance narrative, you could say.
So an explorer's expedition might be described as highly eventful, marked by dangerous wildlife encounters and maybe several averted disasters along the way.
Precisely. Or if you describe a business trip as eventful, you're usually implying it involved some high stakes, required quick problem solving, and probably included a few stressful near misses or unexpected dramas. It neatly acknowledges the unpredictability and the inherent drama of the whole scenario. Hashtag tag outro.
So what does this all mean for you as an advanced English learner? Well, hopefully we've successfully moved beyond just talking about danger. We've armed ourselves with, 30 plus terms that allow for real analytical depth, real precision. You can now, hopefully, professionally identify a stationary hazard, analyze reckless corporate decisions, maybe talk about implementing comprehensive safeguards, or anticipate needing to seek refuge from genuine peril.
And the true value, as you said earlier, it really is the synthesis. It's connecting these terms to analyze the complex systems around us.
Right.
So when you see a team leader make a rash decision on a speculative project, you can immediately recognize, okay, that specific behavior increases the financial peril for the whole organization.
And that realization then drives the next steps.
Exactly. It drives the need for maybe more guarded financial reporting or putting active precautions in place to avert a potential collapse. This nuanced language helps you shift from just describing what happened to analyzing the interconnected dynamics of risk.
It really changes how you process information, doesn't it? It helps you become less of a passive recipient of news or reports and more of an active, precise communicator about management, vulnerability, mitigation. Language really is a tool for control and knowledge.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, talking about risk is fundamentally about how we measure and manage the unknowns in our lives and our work. The more precise, the more specialized your language is, the more accurately you can assess things. The more accurately you can assess your vulnerability, yes, and also gauge the necessary boldness you might need to succeed despite those risks.
So a final thought for you, the listener. Think about a risky scenario you've faced, maybe recently. Could be a big career move, a challenging investment decision, maybe just a time you had to show some personal boldness. Try to analyze it now using some of these precise terms we've discussed.
Yeah, was there an element that felt like a menace? Were your own actions perhaps a bit rash, or were you commendably wary? Did you rely on certain safeguards?
It's a great exercise. We certainly hope this deep dive has been informative and actionable for you. If this analysis thrilled you or maybe just cautiously informed you, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more detailed explorations like this one.